Nigeria's cash crunch, which has gone on for weeks now, if not leading to months. I mean, every Nigerian has felt the impact of the cash crunch, from the long queues at the ATM stands to people trying to get into the bank, people trying to get things, people trying to buy food. A lot of Nigerians will tell you that it has not been easy. Now, recently, the president of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, gave an extension of the deadline for the validity of the nation's redesigned 200 naira notes to the 10th of April 2023. But still on that, some Nigerians have expressed concerns that this will not exactly address the issue of the cash scarcity that is being witnessed across the country. I mean, this has led to so many protests, so many ATMs being burnt down, so many banks being attacked. So people are saying that this is not going to be the solution to the problem. Now, they made this known while speaking to News Central television crew in the nation's capital, Abuja. Our correspondent there, Joseph Edong, compiled this report. Do take a look.
Following widespread protests across the country, Nigeria's federal government finally decided to address agitated citizens who have expressed their displeasure over the Naira redesign policy that has immensely limited cash in circulation. President Muhammadu Buhari, during a State of the Nation address, says despite a Supreme Court ruling calling for a stay of execution on the matter, the federal government has approved an extension of the use of the old 200 naira notes along its redesigned counterparts.
To further ease the supply pressures, particularly to our citizens, I have given approval to the CBN that the old 200 naira banknotes be released back into circulation, and that it should also be allowed to circulate as legal tender with the new 200 naira, 500 naira, and 1,000 naira banknotes for 60 days from February 10th, 2023 to April 10th, 2023, when the old 200 naira notes ceases to be legal tender.
Speaking to a cross-section of Nigerians in the nation's capital, Abuja, some of them have refused to express optimism that a new decision by the president will not address the scarcity of cash or the current hardship being faced by Nigerians.
It won't solve the problem. It will alleviate some of the pains of some people. The question now is, what percentage of the money in circulation is 200 naira? Is it up to 50%? Is it up to 20%? Is it up to 30%?
If you go around Abuja metropolis now, you see that most of those banks are not even functioning again. And even for you to even receive money is a problem. For instance, now in my area where I stay now, if they are giving you 10,000 naira for POs, they will charge you 3,000 naira. You will end up getting 7,000 naira. So it's not a welcome idea. For only him to say they should release 200 naira note is even not a welcome idea, because we are suffering it.
Others, however, commend the announcement by the president, but think it should have come sooner.
Being the lowest among the three, you have people using Okada, people buying groundnuts, people buying tomato, people buying fish. At least it can ease a little bit.
Well, it will help to an extent. It can help to an extent, but we don't even know how long it will help us to, even though they have given a deadline. I don't know.
My worries is that the president allowed this to linger for a very long time. From that on the 10th till now, he will have made the broadcast that they should allow the 200, if the 200 naira is the old 200 is going to allow, or the 500 naira that is going to allow, the 1,000 old note is going to allow to work side by side with the new ones.
While the old denomination of Nigeria's 200 naira notes now remains legal tender till April the 10th, citizens will be hoping that Nigeria's Apex Bank can make the notes readily available for public use.
60 days is the deadline while Nigerians can still use or trade, or while the 200 naira old note still remains a legal tender. But other denominations like the 500 naira and the 1,000 naira, only the new notes are legal tender. Joining us to discuss this is an economist, Gospel Obele.
Gospel, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. Good day.
Good day, our pleasure. Now, Gospel, let's talk about the cash crunch. I mean, the Naira revaluation and redesign has moved from just, a monetary policy to a means to curb vote buying, cash scarcity, and now a legal tussle between, the Apex Court and the Apex Bank as to whether or not they're going to extend the deadline is now ongoing. What do we say about that?
Yes, it's a very tough call right now, and we've seen all the protests and pressure on the Nigerian economy, and how this may spiral into unforeseeable events and all that. So it's quite unfortunate. The policy is well intentioned, but the approach, the timing, and the structuring of its execution also speaks to the fact that we're grossly undermining the average demand for the Naira notes and how much of a cash economy we are, technically. So we're still waiting to hear what the rollouts will be from the central bank, quite honestly. Some state governors has taken power into their hands to sort of, roll out warnings that state resident banks should keep collecting the old notes, and all of that. So for now, it's still a developing story, but it's largely built around a lot of tensions and uncertainties, knowing that the general elections is just a week away.
Gospel, let's take the fact that we understand that the pain of Nigerians is still the Achilles heels of this old policy and its implementation. But I'd like to see if we can get some positives around what this policy really means and what it has done so far. According to the address by the president this morning, it says 2.1 trillion naira out of the banknotes previously held outside the banking system have been successfully retrieved within the exercise. Now, I'm more worried about the direct economic implication of this, because can we say this has served the purpose of mopping up excess liquidity?
Quite honestly, there are upsides to this. The fact that it's probably not well executed doesn't necessarily mean that there have not been any positives. Yeah, there are positives. Nigeria has a very huge counterfeit notes economy. A lot of our close to 80% of the monies that's supposed to be in the central bank were in circulation as at 6 months ago. There are huge political concerns and insecurity risk associated as well. So these are very valid concerns that led to the redesign and further withdrawal of these notes. However, I'd mentioned severally that when this policy started, that it was also a gameplay by the central bank to stay in control of money supply, which for some reasons or due to its own institutional leakages that exist, has sort of spiraled out of its own control, as it were. So I agree that there have been some very early wins as regards to the amount of money that has been, mopped out of the economy in terms of 2.1 trillion. And we're expecting that would also yield some more in terms of on those positives. But however, the central bank needs to find a very creative way to relax the pressure on the Nigerian economy, which would technically mean that ensuring that enough new notes are being produced, possibly note for note, so as people come to deposit some significant amount of old notes, that same value or that same volume should be churned back into the economy, either via the ATMs or something like that. So it has to be go pari passu. It has to go pari passu in context with execution. Otherwise, I think the negatives will far outshine the positives. But I agree with you. There are very good positives on the table. No economy should have so much money, about 80% of its money in circulation. It's not healthy. A lot of insecurity risk associated with that. And we are in the age of currency wars, where economic touch points like currencies are being used to detect power, are being used to detect control, and who controls resources of some sort. Yeah.
So still on the president's address this morning, you also mentioned that all existing old 1,000 naira notes and 500 naira notes will remain redeemable at the Central Bank of Nigeria and some designated points in line with Section 20, Subsection 3 of the CBN Act 2007. But doesn't this negate the fact that, we've seen how banks have been operating of recent, both the online transactions have not been successful, and even in person, you can't just walk into a bank. There are always complaints that there's no money, so isn't that a contradictory statement?
Yeah, it actually calls for worry because, again, the pattern of its execution in terms of this policy And these recent events that have played, I mean, look at the protests in Benin, yesterday, in Oyo State, and what has been happening in the past 1 week. It's been quite worrisome, and that actually quite, overshadows whatsoever valid and, logical conversation, that is being presented, or logical argument that is being presented on the table. So until we begin to do more around ensuring that the ATMs are delivering, the new notes are also available, to dispense, and that speaks a lot around not just our execution as a people, but our ideology as a nation. In the UK, these whole currency conversations have been in view for quite some time now, ever since Queen Elizabeth II died. And the argument has been that the new notes carrying King Charles III will co-circulate with the old notes, from mid-2024. So there are no definite 45 days, deadline to come to a UK bank and switch all that. That's not happening, all right? So there has to be a sense of pacing these execution. And in pacing it, you also do not underestimate the supply-demand dynamics that's going to be required to ensure that it's a solid policy rollout. And I think that was largely underestimated, and that's why we're having a lot of protests and tensions around it. And the banks have sort of run out of options in terms of managing it. So you see people cannot withdraw across the counters, the ATMs are not working, and plus you have a fuel scarcity challenge as well. That's really literally bringing the economy to a halt. It can be technically likened to the lockdown we had in 2020. Just that people are now outside, but they can't access their monies.
Speaking of bringing the economy to the halt, I can imagine, because I've had some Nigerians also reach out to me and say, getting to work has even been very, very difficult. But I'm more we've spoken about the implementation of this policy. Let's look at even the dissemination of information, which is one of the things that is even affecting people more. It's surprising to say that as at 7 a.m. this morning, when the president said, when news came out that the president was going to give an address, it was very late yesterday. And as at 7 a.m. this morning, when he gave that address, as at 8 or a little 7:30-ish, when people got to the bus park, information had reached them that they can now start taking 200 now, which they were not taking before. So I'm more concerned. Is it that one of the issues that Nigeria is having here is communication gap?
Yes, so it's a major issue, not just, as a result of this policy. To a very large extent, I think the private sector also has that problem. The public sector has that problem. The social sector has a problem where people are not really, really given to, improving in the level, the quality, and the nature of information being dispensed per time. And that's very consistent. If you look at all government programs, if you look at government policies, even how those policies are communicated and churned out and executed, there is always a communication challenge. So in as much as, yes, that's a given, it means that it's still a public leadership conversation that we need to work on, in terms of expectations for the next president-elect and the next public service holders to begin to improve on public sector communication as it relates to ensuring that the citizens are aware, all the stakeholders across the value chain are aware. I also sense some form of political tensions around how the excesses of these events are being managed. I think the president could have come out earlier enough, to give us addresses or roll out these necessary conversations around how we are seeking to mitigate the risk and what can be done. It's quite unfortunate that the second leg of deadline has passed, and then you are hearing, some very urgent communication from the presidency. So I think to a very large extent, it's sort of a lesson for us going forward into the new administration that a lot across the fiscal and monetary policies have to be fixed when it comes to communicating policies, communicating programs, communicating updates. And we also need to be very realistic on how we manage execution and the deadlines around the execution. I think we're very focused around the deadline than the process leading up to that deadline. So every stakeholder has to get their act together. There's so much leakages between the central bank, the commercial banks, the agent banks, the agent banking stakeholders, as well as the POS operators and co. All right. So there is no reason why Nigerians should be buying their own money at a higher price. So there's also so much inconsistency and misalignment in the system that coming out urgently or in an urgent manner to communicate shows a death of public leadership in our system.
All right, thank you so much, Gospel Obele. It's been amazing having you join us on the show. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Okay.